Namaste, everyone. Welcome. We're so happy to have you here. And my name is Kalpana. I'm from Heartfulness Wellness, and we would just like to wish you a very happy World Mental Health Day. This is something that we've been looking so forward to celebrating. And we have two eminent speakers here to have conversations about spirituality, its role in mental health, and especially yoga and healing. And I'm so looking forward to having these conversations with these two eminent speakers. And I think I would just like to introduce them. I would love to take this opportunity to introduce our speakers. So Miss Charlotte has worked in the field of international cooperation for over 20 years, including a focus on Afghanistan between 2000 and 2010. She started working on emergency nutrition programs in Afghanistan and Ethiopia. In 2005, she joined the UN Food and Agriculture Organization as nutrition advisor to the Ministry of Agriculture, Irrigation, and Livestock in Afghanistan. In 2010, she moved to the UN FAO headquarters in Rome, where she supported the integration of nutrition in agriculture and resilience policies and programs. Since 2007, she works as a consultant on sustainable food systems and is part of the 4SD team that offers immersions on systems leadership. She is also an instructor of Ananda Yoga and meditation. She is currently founding the organization Listening Inspires, an initiative to promote listening to one's deeper self, to others, and to nature, and to infuse policy making and action planning with wisdom, love, and joy. I would also like to introduce Mr. Vasco Gaspar, who is our second speaker today. Mr. Vasco works as an author, speaker, and facilitator in the fields of awareness-based human flourishing and conscious leadership. He also inspires change and transformation in organizations worldwide for a more human and compassionate world. He is certified as a teacher in a wide range of awareness-based technologies and trained directly by some of the world's greatest specialties in the field of mindfulness, heartfulness, presencing, SPT, internal family systems, polyvagal theory, and giftivism. He works closely with different global NGOs like the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute, the Heartfulness Institute, and the Presencing Institute. And he spends most of his time traveling in silence, exploring the mysteries of the inner and outer world. I'm so happy to have both of you on board as our panelists to have this conversation around the significance of spirituality, yoga, and meditation in mental health. Just before we enter the conversation, I would also like to introduce myself. My name is Kalpana, as I already mentioned. I am a trainee health psychologist, and mental health has been one of my passions growing up. I've been studying this field for the past 5 years, and I'm so excited to be here. Welcome, Charlotte. I think my first question to you, to kind of ease into this conversation around mental health, spirituality, and yoga in our context, right? What, according to you, if you could define mental health and spirituality, what would you define both of these terms as?
I think for me, mental health is very much about feeling a sense of joy, of lightness, of probably alignment between the way we lead our lives and what our heart truly aspires to. A sense of fulfillment and purpose. I think when we feel well mentally, we feel happy and often grateful. That's how I would define the two. And as I say this, I think we see already the parallel with spirituality. For me, spirituality is really about connecting and nourishing the connection to what we can call our higher self or our soul, learning to disentangle ourselves from the fears and attachments of the ego, and learning to connect to our higher self, and also to that. I like to think of it as a source of love that animates the whole world. We can call it the divine. There are many words for it, but I like to think of it as an expansive source of love. And the journey of spirituality is nourishing that connection. Meditation just brings so much, I think, to our lives, especially and it's an ever lasting journey of deepening, every time and you always can continue seeking. So one thing is helping finding that space of peace when you're going through very turbulent times. I think also many mental health problems are connected to a wound, a soul wound. I just this weekend I was reading a book which was mentioning the 5 soul wounds that were described by a lady called Lise Bourbeau: rejection, humiliation, abandonment, injustice, and betrayal. And she describes how each of us, our soul comes in a particular incarnation and chooses to be challenged in one of these wounds, to go deeper. And all of them have in common that they're about a breakage in love, a feeling not loved. If and when you go deep in meditation, and I'm tempted to say meditation with devotion, because devotion, bhakti yoga is such an important part of meditation. What you end up finding, or at least my experience is, I feel connected to an immense source of love. I feel very, very, very loved. And, it's also some cultures, they don't speak about necessarily God, but they have the issue of Mother Earth, of Pachamama, and or the Divine Mother. Yogananda speaks a lot and evokes a lot the Divine Mother. It's this mother with infinite love. And I think that's a space we're invited to touch through meditation. And at a much, I would say, almost practical level, meditation also guides us in discernment, in making decisions, finding what is the right path, what is the dharmic choice for me today. And when you're faced with a sea of confusion and everything seems so hard to decide, you get lost. But through meditation, you cultivate your intuition, and the choices you make can be guided from a deeper space.
So there's a lot of perspectives on, okay, when should yoga be practiced? I think specifically hatha yoga. What time of the day, what hour in a day? What is your take on the time frame that we practice yoga in over the course of a day?
I'm tempted to say everybody should find what works. I like to do it in the morning before my meditation.
Right.
And so sometimes I struggle to wake up early enough so that I can do the hatha yoga, do the meditation, etc. But I find hatha yoga is such a preparation for meditation, in terms of allowing the energy to flow more smoothly in your body so that you can go deeper within, calming the mind. But when I was going to yoga classes, I would do them in the evening, and they would be a wonderful break from the day. I offer yoga classes in the evening, and I actually love it because they energize me so much. But I also have one of my yoga instructors. She's so busy teaching yoga, and she has children and everything. So her technique is to have yoga mats around the house, so that whenever she has a minute between running her yoga center, taking care of the kids, she could just do 5 minutes of yoga postures here and there. I'm also often recommended just to, why don't you do a tree pose in the middle of the day, and when you're stressed? Or there's some postures, like the forward bend when you need to just calm down, or the child's pose, that we can revisit. So we can be very creative about how we fit yoga in the day. And one thing I find with my own practice is I so love when I can have a long session, but the reality of our schedules is not always that. Really constantly reminding myself 5 minutes is better than nothing, and so a minimum thing is 3 pairs of sun salutations. It takes 5 to 10 minutes, but it makes a whole difference.
How did you inspire for yourself that discipline to have a dedicated practice for yourself? How did you start becoming consistent in increasing enhancing your well-being through yoga and meditation?
Hard to do alone. So I would say regularity, good company, and sometimes you need to go through a phase where you just lose it. I confess in recent weeks I had very much lost it, and I was not well. And that's kind of gives me the spurt to like, okay, no. But now, now I have to be much more disciplined because I need it. I love it. I'm so much better. And an advantage of I found when, we carry so much tensions before practicing yoga, and I see this in a number of people who do yoga with me, you're not even aware of the tensions you have. But as you start practicing hatha yoga, you're like, oh, wow. And when you start opening to what your body actually could feel when it's well, then you start being much more aware of what's bad for you, whether also in terms of diets, in terms of breathing better. Actually, I think bringing a big part of bringing yoga in our daily routine is also to stop and breathe. Take 5 minutes or 2 minutes even before a meeting to do full yogic breathing.
What are other things that we can focus on, especially after the repercussions of the pandemic?
Yes, I was thinking also, because you mentioned the physical disease. And I think that's where the other paths of yoga. So, there's the bhakti yoga of devotion, the jnana yoga of discernment, analysis, self-analysis, karma yoga, your union through action, through service, and raja yoga, the overall, and the science of meditation. So all these facets of yoga are so key. And one aspect so this book I was reading was really explaining how many of the physical illnesses we have are often actually when one of our soul wounds is activated. And when you are able to identify how a particular event has reactivated a wound, you can then address this cause. Just last week, I was feeling absolutely exhausted. It was like the energy was draining out of my body, and I couldn't get it back. And reading this book helped me realize, oh, here might be the wounds that are resonating with me. Just the mere fact that I identified them, and like, that's how this event has affected me. That's why I'm so upset. Because part of me was like upset with myself for being that affected and for being that tired. And I'm like, what's wrong with me? Kind of get back into gear. So I was getting angry with myself for not being well. But then as soon as I identified the cause, I'm like, okay. Then, and with a few things like this, bang, my energy came back. And and in that book, they described many, many occasions of healing of difficult diseases through this awareness of the soul wounds. So again, going back, yoga is such a comprehensive science, where jnana yoga, again, this discernment, this knowing what are my patterns? Why am I reacting in this way? Why do I get triggered when somebody says or does this? Or and again, by meditating, you can have a calmer mind that helps you be more aware and in greater discernment. And bringing back the hatha yoga, I've learned through this better understanding also of the chakras and how they relate to. I remember one time my lower back got stuck, and I'm like, oh, and this seems to be around the second chakra. And I'm like, okay, what does this mean? That's probably what happened. That's what's triggered this back pain. So on one hand, I could work on the yoga postures that would help open up the energy flows and bring the second chakra back into balance. But I was also working on, okay, this is the emotional trigger for this back pain, and working on those two levels. And I think that's why we say yoga is it's very much about consciousness and awareness, self-awareness.
In a more general sense, what kind of advice would you give someone who is trying to start building a spiritual connection with themselves, or embarking on a journey of self-acceptance or self-love, or just wanting to have a relationship with themselves? What advice would you give them?
Yogananda shares, which is, you can drink from many wells, to reach the source. And it's good to go try the water from different wells. They all go down to the same source, the same aquifer. Once you've found the one that seems right for you, then choose it and go deep. So I think there's that being open to what comes your way, what resonates, where does your heart open? You might retrospectively recognize the signs. And I had such interest. I also practiced Kriya Yoga as taught by Yogananda. And I was hesitating. Do I go into that practice? It's a certain commitment. But I was starting meeting people out of the blue, completely unexpected sources that either were doing that technique or were giving me a book that was mentioning it. So I think be aware of the signs, listen to your heart.
So now, like when we're talking about having our heart open and just being sensitive to what's really working for us and what's not, right? To me, it kind of sounds like, how do we build that inner connection with the inner world in ourselves, like that deepening in ourselves? What advice would you give to someone at the same time, right? Like it's also important to connect to the larger world outside of us, the spirituality in the outer world. How can we do that? What is your advice on that?
So I'm an instructor of Ananda Yoga. I'm finishing my training to be an instructor of meditation. So I already have a little bit of experience with that. And what we are invited to do when we share this practice is to really try to position ourselves as a channel for that wisdom. And it's not us. It's not you, Charlotte, teaching. It is that source. And so so our own alignment is, our own practice is very, very important, precisely to be us connected. And then I try to be listening very attentively, and I'm guiding a yoga class. I'm trying to be very, very attentive to what's happening in me in terms of the sensations of energy and how it flows, inviting those with me to maybe be open to sensations, but knowing that they will have their unique experience of that. So I think it can really help to be guided by, like, I know when I started meditation, there was one particular meditation that was guided by a lady in Ananda who's been meditating deeply for decades. And through her, thanks to her, I mean, there were three of us in the class, and the three of us had an wow experience, like, whoa. And it was thanks to her devotion. She had been a channel for us. So I really think all the great masters had their own gurus, right? They need, even if they were realized masters, they needed that guidance. And I think we need those guides. We need their guidance. If you already know your guide, we constantly can re-invite them. And I'm saying this to myself as I say it, to add their guidance to help that connection. Yeah, I think that they hold that key to the inner world. And then also things like journaling and this path of awareness, awareness of your body, so you can recognize tensions, whether they be physical or emotional. It's a variety of tools that are at our disposal, but it's a never-ending journey. And you can constantly go deeper.
And also, how is it that you want to bridge sustainable development with yoga and like keeping the whole mind of keeping the whole umbrella of well-being in mind? How do you want to see this kind of come to be?
I mean, at a very practical level, it's simply sharing some of the yoga practices and wisdom, the science of yoga with people, my peers working in humanitarian organizations or in UN or NGOs or governments, or people who are trying to make the world a better place, and it's bloody hard and we burn out. And here are tools that can really help. They transform the way I could approach my work, and sharing those. So that's one level. There's a deeper level I think yoga teaches us, at least that's my understanding, that this life, this world is an opportunity our souls have chosen to experience learning and to kind of grow together. And so that it raises the question, what is to be sustained? Because I also, another teaching of yoga, which I found very, very inspiring, is, it's Brahman, Vishnu, and Shiva. There's this cycle of, you have the creator, the sustainer, and the destroyer. And we have this constant cycle going in our world. And that's fine. Embracing death as part of life and knowing that there is a reality beyond that cycle and that we are thirsty to go beyond that. So there's so on one hand, yes, while we are on this plane, in this world with its duality and its suffering, let's try to sustain the well-being. Let's try to be healthy. So that's why this energy of Vishnu and Narayan, therefore. But at the same time, embracing that there's a whole other level, and I go back to these words of Jesus: "Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all things will be given unto you." Right? And so when we seek that union with the divine, then a lot of things get solved much, much, much easier. And I think that the so-called development challenges that we face are that opportunity to go find that space. So we'll solve some problems by 2030, and then a new batch of problems will come up because we will still have some learning to do. So even if we achieve all the sustainable development goals, it ain't over because our souls have a long, long way to go. And that's okay. It's embracing that with joy, I think. Another thing that can be so helpful, including for eco-anxiety, is gratitude. Because there's so much we take for granted. There's so much we take for granted, and we, in our societies. I mean, I've lived in difficult war contexts many years in Afghanistan, and when I come back to other countries, I just get shocked how people are complaining. And yeah, things can always be better, they can always be worse. But if we start being grateful for what is there, and I would say in this particular phase of our evolution, in particular nature, and if we can show gratitude and respect, great gratitude is what makes your heart feel full. So I think, yes, practicing gratitude is a key for heartfulness.
On this occasion of World Mental Health Day, I think the first question I would like to ask you, based on your experiences in your life, personally, how would you define mental health?
That's a good question, and I never thought about it. So thank you for allowing me to reflect on it. The first word that comes to mind is integration, integration and space. So to have the capacity so mental health for me means somehow being integrated with myself. So being at ease with myself, being at ease in my own skin, with my own emotions, with my own thoughts, with my own, including pain and suffering. So, and have space to hold all of that. Integration with myself, being at ease with myself, being able to hold all of my different parts of me, and being able from that space also to connect with others, to connect, for instance, to have this conversation with you, Kalpana, to have the capacity to be at ease with the world, which doesn't mean that at some point I will not be suffering, or will not be sad, or will not be angry, but it's not who I am. It's something that is happening in me, and I can hold that. I can integrate these different parts.
Yeah. According to you, how has spirituality showed up in your life, especially when you embarked on these journeys of mindfulness and heartfulness, and yeah, in general? How has spirituality showed up in?
Thank you. So it showed up in, I would say, in two ways. So one way was through the path of seeking. So that something in me longed for some deeper connection. So there was a sense of there's something more. There's something that's not missing, but that's something more, that I want to be connected with something larger. So there was this seeking for some connection for one end. At the other end, to be very honest and frank with you, there was also a lot of suffering in my life at that point. So there was a lot of sadness, there was a lot of depression, there was a lot of anxiety, especially when I was a teenager. And at that point, the way I tried to soothe those feelings, because they were very overwhelming, was through, I don't know, alcohol and things that are not so healthy. So they went hand in hand at the point, the suffering, like trying to alleviate the suffering, and at the same time, something in me that longed for more. That led me to try many different practices and approaches and traditions. And at some point, I found out about heartfulness, and the two things somehow started to come together. So for one end, the connection was there somehow. There was a sense of being connected that I didn't understand cognitively. So it was not a cognitive realization. So it was more like a sense of peacefulness and being at ease. And at the same time, the suffering somehow started to dissipate. And I was lucky, because some people don't have the same experience necessarily. And sometimes I think there's a tricky thing here, which is sometimes we can also use spirituality or meditation or other practices as what is coined as spiritual bypass. So that we all in our lives have things that we need to face, like we are humans and we have things that come to us. We need to solve our issues with our parents, first of all, or the caregivers. We all carry burdens from the past. We all have things we are ashamed of. So, and sometimes the pain is very intense in us, maybe in some subconscious way even. So some people are not even aware that they are suffering, and they turn to spirituality as a way to run away from pain, run away from problems, run away from issues. And that, I would say, it's not so healthy. It's not that people are doing that consciously. It's people are just suffering. They're trying to find a way to their suffering. But then there is this it's a fine line between growing up spiritually and spiritually bypassing. So, and I think both need to so the growing up. So there is a philosopher, American philosopher I like very much, called Ken Wilber. He says that in spirituality there are four things. One is about waking up. And waking up is waking up to yourself, waking up to different levels of consciousness, and so on. Then there is the growing up. So you as a human being, you grow up in your spirituality, you grow up in your levels of consciousness, you grow up in your values, the capacity to be connected with not only your tiny little thing and family and friends, but then you can expand that to include the whole world and all beings. So you can expand your consciousness. So that's a promise of spirituality as well. Then there's about showing up. Showing up is about who are you and what is life wanting to live through you. So what is your calling somehow? What is your service to the world at each moment? But then he also speaks about cleaning up. Okay, and cleaning up is about cleaning up the burdens and the things from the past that somehow block you to grow up.
How and why do you think it's important to integrate spirituality in mental health care and in general in mental health?
Before the pandemic, there was almost, I think it was 800,000 people per world committing suicide every year. And this number is higher than if you sum up wars, natural disasters and homicides together in the world. There are more people committing suicide than people dying from disasters and wars and so on. So why does this happen? Why are these people so disconnected from themselves? Because they suffer a lot. They are not trying to kill themselves. They are trying to kill the suffering. They are trying to kill the part of them that is so much in pain that they cannot bear it anymore. They decide to kill themselves. And these are not just and this is happening all over the world. Actually, in some of the countries that you're going to expect to be the most educated and industrialized, whatever, that's where this is happening even more, and even in kids and teenagers. So what is happening here that we are not looking? So if we believe, and I believe, and spirituality points to that, that we have a healthy core, that we have a healthy, sane part of ourselves, that we have a essence that is naturally compassionate, naturally loving, naturally clear, naturally creative. If we know that, and if we believe that, and spirituality, at least some branches of spirituality point to that, okay, we can help people to reconnect with that space.
How do we bridge the gap between science and spirituality when it comes to psychology as a field and mental health as a field? How do we strike that balance between, oh, we want empirical, quantitative, qualitative evidence, and oh, we want to live by experience and understand that not everything can be quantified, it can only be experienced?
Science is very based. It's a huge question, and unfortunately, I'm very happy that nowadays we are seeing other approaches coming up, and even in the West, Western psychology, these for instance, these practices or approaches that I share, for instance, compassionate inquiry has a lot of influence from spiritual traditions, a lot of influences. There is a recognition of the wisdom of these traditions. So, and at the same time, there's a recognition of the wisdom of science. So, in trying to bridge both together, or interpersonal neurobiology also looks at different perspectives. And I think we need a multi-perspective approach, not just my approach is better than your approach and it's better than your approach, because systemically it's also a problem systemically, because the system is based on you get funds according to the amount of papers you produce. Imagine, I'm just giving you an example. So then you're running against other laboratories to show for you to have more papers than to have more funds. So we lost a little bit sometimes in some places, and of course there's beautiful exceptions, but sometimes we lost the reason, the purpose. Why are we doing this? And maybe the reason is to serve people and to bring well-being to people and to help them be more reconnected. Because if they are reconnected, and once again coming to the divides, they are more able to hold themselves and be themselves and bring themselves into the world. They are more able to reconnect with each other, so the social divide. Yeah. And they are more able to reconnect with the world and to reconnect with animals and with birds and with the trees and with the ocean and with the quality of the air and the water. So because we are all part of this same thing, and if we compartmentalize, if we put things in silos, we lose this connection. But first of all, the grief. Are we able to hold the grief individually, collectively, at the social level? Are we able? I don't know if we are able, to be very honest with you. I don't know if we have tools, most of us, to hold that. I don't know if we have safe spaces to hold that, because we need safe spaces to be with each other, to hold each other, to grieve with each other, to look at the things with each other. And I don't know about how is it in India and other places in the world, but being able to integrate ourselves and to hold these painful, difficult emotions, we want that. Once again, we don't like to feel them, without trying to fix you, without trying to...
What more would you add in terms of like the advice you would give to someone who is trying to, number one, build a relationship with themselves, embark on the journey of trying to accept and love themselves, or trying to have self-realization, all of that? So what would your advice for that be? And second, what would your advice be for someone who is trying to connect to the world around them? And again, when we're circling back to the idea of spirituality, we're talking about how it is this kind of connection to something that's beyond me, right? And something that's larger than myself. So how do we connect to the inner large self? Wait, that doesn't make sense. How do you connect to the bigger world inside of me, the inner world, and how do I connect to the outer world, both of which are beyond my present existence right now?
We can connect with this larger self, for sure. And some people go directly into trying to go into that field. I believe that first of all, we need to reconnect with this larger self inside ourselves. Okay. And for that, you can. There's many practices. There's meditation. Heartfulness, for instance, is one of them. At least for me, it's the practice that I find most useful for me. Doesn't mean that it is for others, but for me, it is the one that allows me to reconnect with this larger self inside myself. That allows me to, once again, have space inside my mind and to declutter my mind and to clean up the impressions of my mind through the practice, for instance, of cleaning. And even the body, can regulate the body through the relaxation practice and so on. So by integrating myself and allowing myself to integrate these different layers, from that quietness of that inside connection, then it comes, I believe, at least for me, a natural connection with the outside world. So it's natural. It's not something that I'm forcing, not saying that, oh, now I'm going to connect with the outside world. Okay, let me connect. It's more about realizing that you are always connected. It's not about, you don't need to connect with the outside. You are part of it. It's just a realization of it, that okay. And for me, that realization comes from the reconnection with this larger self inside me, and that naturally expands to the outside world, and I'm able to be more in contact with others, and I'm able to be more compassionate towards others and to other beings. For instance, before I meditated, I used to eat meat, and now there was no one kind of, now you need to be a vegetarian, or so. That there was nothing outside of me that imposed me that I need to be a vegetarian. It was just so natural to realize, wait a minute, this thing I'm eating used to be not a human being. Sorry, I'm not a cannibal. Used to be an animal. And I like animals. I really love animals. I love to be with animals. So, and this is the same animal, or this same being I so love. Why am I eating this? This doesn't make any sense. So there was inside of me a discomfort. So naturally evolved the choice to stop eating animals. So it was not something that, no, I'm going to become a vegetarian to show up to the others as more enlightened or more. Okay, so the spiritual path is also about that, like, I'm going to meditate now to show to my friends that I'm very enlightened, and I already can meditate 2 hours a day, so look at me, I'm very very skillful. So it's not about that. It's really about so practices like meditation, practices that allow you to connect with the body, practices just simple going into nature, being in nature without the need of any agenda. Practices like journaling, writing yourself a letter. Have you tried to write yourself a love letter? Like, not to pump up your ego, like, oh, you're so good, and go with it, yeah, like Tony Robbins style. So that's not the goal, but more like, oh, I understand that now it's difficult for you. Yeah, I get that. It's really hard to be here. It's really hard to hold these feelings, and just put whatever comes to the mind into the paper. So it's simple things. It's not rocket science. Of course, if you have huge traumas, yes, maybe you don't need, but you can do some therapy. Especially, I suggest therapy that has this connection with self and with the body, not just being in your mind talking about the problems, and that will just reinforce them, I believe, and not solve them. Maybe sometimes it can solve one on another. So yeah, so those are simple things.
I think my last question now would be, the WHO is this the theme this time, right? Was really focusing on improving the kind of accessibility that mental health has to everyone, and just improving the reach that mental health has, especially as, like, we spoke about the shift that the pandemic has mentally and socially on all of us, physically being implied. How, and this, we can be very creative with this, right? So how do you think we can improve accessibility of mental health?
I think education is something that can be at the core of it. And education about some very simple, basic things. So it's not so the same way that, I don't know, kids now go to school and they learn Portuguese or English or maths or whatever. in some places this is also already happening, but what about telling or teaching kids how their bodies work, how their nervous system work, not in a complex way like with difficult names and things like that, but to allow them to realize that they have a body, and sometimes that body is scared, and when the body is scared, the heart beats faster and the chest contracts and the body shrinks. So to be aware of that, and then they have a breathing mechanism, for instance, that they can use to breathe and to relax and so on. So I would say that if we give not only to kids but to people in general simple tools of self-regulation, and once again, these tools are not, the idea is not to heal people, is not to solve the problems of people, it's not to help them become enlightened. So a step at a time. If people are in survival mode, either because of the pandemic, either because they are afraid, either because they are traumatized from the past, whatever, but if they are in fight or flight mode or in freeze or collapse mode, most of them are not aware that they are like that. They are in that state. So just educating them with a simple, very simple, I don't know, with very simple videos or cartoons, whatever. Just that's nothing wrong with me. I'm just scared. That's normal. Just to give language to people of what they are feeling, like a literacy. Is a literacy of the human being, in this case more the body. And then, okay, what can I do with it? And simple things again. Little practices like 1 minute practice, 5 minute practice, 3 minute practice. And from that place of self-regulation, and because we are social beings, we co-regulate with each other. So from that place, we start co-regulating with others. So I'm more able to be with my parents, or with my kids, or with my colleagues. So, and the environment around me starts to become also with more sanity. So, and if the environment starts to have more sanity, the society also starts to have more sanity. So it's like a domino effect. But I think it needs to start with the individual, with little baby steps, educating them, giving language to them, and little practices. And then spirituality, I think it will come naturally afterwards. Because when you are really in contact with your sanity, that sanity will long for expansion. Okay? You want to expand that love, and to expand that compassion, to expand that calmness to others also, in yourself. So that will, I think, evolve in a very natural way.
With that, dear brothers and sisters, we kind of come to a closure for our conversation with Mr. Vasco and Ms. Charlotte. I just want to extend my gratitude for having these conversations, and to the both of you for joining me and having this dialogue on why spirituality, yoga, and healing is so significant when we talk about mental health in the first place. So I'm so grateful. Thank you so much for joining us.